Good morning and welcome back to Pick Up the Pieces. I am Stacy and we're in the pickup kitchen this morning. It's cold outside and we wanted something warm and hearty for dinner. So I'm going to make some homemade bread and some chili. And so this chili recipe is based off of my friend Kathy's recipe. A number of years ago I worked with her and we used to have like potlucks at the office and she brought her chili in one time and it was fantastic. So I've kind of modified it a little bit, but this is a recipe based off of my friend Kathy's chili, and then I'm making no knead bread. Now we're gonna cross our fingers and say a little prayer that this bread's gonna work out. I should have started this dough last night. It really technically requires 12 hours or so to hang out at room temperature before it's ready to bake, but we've got about 8 hours until we're gonna make it, so I'm hoping that that's gonna be enough time and that we don't have a bread fail on us. But anyway, I'm gonna get started with that and then I'll show you how to make chili. So our bread, I'm making 2 loaves, and so I'm using 2 separate bowls. And so each loaf takes about 1.5 cups of water. And so I'm just gonna get that amount of water here into our bowls. And this is warm water, it's about 100 degrees, came out of my tap. And that is warm water so that the yeast gets going. Now each bowl of bread dough will get 1/2 teaspoon of yeast, and this is instant yeast. And then 2 teaspoons of salt per bowl. And I use kosher salt for baking. And then we need 3 cups of flour per bowl. And then we're gonna mix this together and then cover it, keep it warm, and let it sit at room temperature. So our flour, we need 1, 2 cups. And then that's 3 cups. And then in the other bowl, same thing. That's 2. And 3. So now I'm just going to take my Danish whisk and give these a mix. And then, like I said, we're going to cover these and we're going to let these rest at room temperature. And I'm going to put them in the warmest spot of the kitchen, which is probably going to be over by the stove because that's where we're going to make the chili. And then hopefully these will get to work and we will hopefully have some decent bread for dinner. Now, this bread reminds me of sourdough when it cooks because it'll make a nice round loaf. But we're not big sourdough fans, and so it'll be the shape of the sourdough and a little bit of the texture of it, but won't have the sourdough flavor because we're just using all-purpose flour and stuff like that. So that will be great. So that looks like it's pretty good. I may take my bowl scraper and just give it a couple more turns. But what I would like to do, since I can tell that this still feels warm from that warm water, is I want to keep it as warm as possible because, like I said, we're sort of in a time crunch. I should have done this last night before bed and I forgot. So we want this to get mixed together and kept warm. And this Danish whisk is nice for making or mixing bread doughs because of the shape of it. It brings the dough together really nicely. And unlike a whisk, you don't get like everything stuck in the bottom of the whisk. Okay, so I'm just going to get this dough off of here. And then I'm just going to take my bowl scraper here and just make sure that this is thoroughly mixed. I don't want like a pocket of salt or a pocket of yeast or anything like that to get in the way of this rising. So that one looks good. And this one, we're just gonna make sure we get like that flour scraped off the edge of the bowl. And it is a slightly sticky dough, it's a slightly wet dough, and that's completely fine because it's going to sit, and that flour will have a chance to absorb the water, and the yeast will have a chance to do its thing. And now this, we have at least 8 hours for this to hang out, which is great. And what I could also do is bake one of the loaves, which we can have for dinner, and then I can leave the other one to rise just a little bit longer, so that way if the first loaf isn't as great as we like it, well then the second one will save the day. So I'm going to cover these with some saran wrap and wrap them in towels just to keep them as warm as possible, and then I'm going to show you in a minute at the stove how we start our chili. It's time to get our chili started, so I've got a large soup pot here. I'm going to start over medium heat, and I'm just going to add about a tablespoon of a neutral flavored oil. And I'm going to bring that to temperature. What I want to do first is saute my onions and my garlic. I'll add my onion first and get that sort of translucent before I add the garlic because I don't want the garlic to burn. But this is, I would say, more like 1.5 large onions. We had just sort of a bunch of little onions that we wanted to use up because they didn't look like they were going to store very well. So I would say it's 1.5 large onions is probably the best estimation of how much onion that was, because it was like 4 little ones. So I'm going to get our onions going. And once I have the onions sort of wilted down and got a little skin in there, got to get that out. So once our onions wilt down a bit, then I will add the garlic, and then I will add our spices to wake them up, and we'll saute our ground beef. And then we'll add the other ingredients, and I'll show you exactly how I do it. So we're just going to let these onions saute. Our onions have been sauteing for about 5 minutes, and they are caramelizing a little bit, and that is perfectly fine. Caramelized onions equal flavor, and we want our chili to be very flavorful. So now I'm going to add 2 cloves of garlic. And I've chopped that up in my little garlic chopper. So there's that. And we're going to get that sauteing just until we can kind of smell the garlic. And that smells amazing. I'm just going to turn the heat down a tiny bit because I don't want my garlic to burn. But that smells great. And so now we are going to add some spices, and after we get our spices in and toasted, then we are going to put in our ground beef and cook that. So we need some Ancho chili powder. Now this Ancho chili powder is phenomenal, and it adds a ton of flavor. And so I don't really tend to measure with measuring spoons, but I would say start off with about half a tablespoon of it. We are making a big pot of chili. You could always add more later if you need to, but start off with half a tablespoon. I'm also going to add a couple of shots of Frank's Red Hot, and so 4 dabs of that. And then we're going to add some smoked paprika, and with that, probably about that much. I would say that's probably about a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. And I'm going to also add some regular paprika, probably about the same amount, maybe a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. And then cumin is going in. And so cumin, I'll be adding probably about a teaspoon. You don't want a lot of cumin. You can always add more, but once you get too much in there, that's not a good thing, to have too much cumin. So now with these spices in here, I'm going to combine them in with the oil and with the onion and the garlic. That way these spices, which are dried and have been sitting in a cabinet, they're going to wake up and they're going to contribute lots of great flavor. And it's okay later on when you taste this if you find that it doesn't have enough of something in it that you want to add a little bit more. But if you add in your seasonings in the beginning and kind of toast them up with your oil, they just have a lot more depth of flavor than if you just sprinkle them all on the top. So like I said, if you end up under seasoning at this point, that's fine. You can always adjust later. But I do recommend anytime you add seasonings to anything, especially like a soup or a sauce or a stew, that you add your seasonings to your hot oil so that you wake them up and they taste the best that they possibly can. So I'm going to add a little bit of my homemade pepper flakes. I made these a while ago. What I did was I took green chilies. They were not red, but pepper flakes, when you buy them, like crushed red pepper flakes or crushed green pepper flakes, which is what these are, it really is just a dehydrated pepper that's kind of pureed up in like your food processor or ground up. And that's all this is. And so I made these a while back. I had gone to the produce market. They had beautiful peppers, and I didn't want to just eat them raw because I knew they'd be hot. So I just made my own crushed green pepper flakes, basically. So I'm just going to take probably like a quarter teaspoon here and add that. I don't want to add too much pepper at this point because we are also going to add some roasted poblano peppers to this. And so we're building sort of layers of flavor and layers of heat, but I still want to be able to eat this. I don't want it to be so spicy that we don't enjoy it. Okay, so that is good. Now we are going to just scrape off all these great bits of spices that are on my wooden spoon. Get that back in the pot. And now we're going to add in our ground beef. So we have 1 pound of local ground beef here. And we are going to get this broken up in the pan and cook it down. Now, I did not remember, just like I did not remember to make my bread last night, I did not remember to thaw my ground beef last night. So what I did, my ground beef, when it comes, it's in like a plastic bag and then wrapped in butcher paper, and then we keep it in the freezer. So what I did was I took my ground beef out of the butcher paper, tied up the plastic bag, and put it in a sink with just some warm water to help it to defrost more quickly for me. I do that only right before I'm about to cook something. I would never defrost my meat in warm water like that and then put it in the fridge for later. I only do it immediately before cooking. So, so the center of this ground beef might still be a little bit frozen, but it'll be fine as it starts to cook up in the pot here. It's going to defrost for me. So we're going to get this ground beef cooked down, and when it is, I will show you what the next step is. Our beef is cooked now, and so nice and brown. We've got a tiny little bit of beef juices or beef fat in the pan here, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm leaving that in. This chili does not have a lot of fat in it, and I don't want to lose that flavor, so we're going to leave that in. Now, I just need to add some salt and pepper to our beef. I did not do that yet. So fresh cracked black pepper and a little bit of pink salt. Now, we can always season a little bit more later on. There's a whole lot of other ingredients that are going to go into this that are going to add lots of flavor, so we can check it later for seasoning. And this is going to simmer all day long. It's not even 10 in the morning yet. It's early in the day, and this is going to simmer until we have it for dinner. And the longer it simmers, the better. And leftovers of this are even better. So we are going to let this cook all day long. Okay, so now we're going to add some roasted poblano peppers. Now what I did over the summer when our local farmers market had poblano peppers on sale, I grabbed a bunch of them and I roasted them and I peeled off the skins and then I sliced them up and I put them in a freezer bag. And we use poblano peppers, roasted poblano peppers, in our enchiladas and in our chili. So this is basically like the equivalent of 2 peppers that were roasted with the skins and the seeds removed. And that's going to go in, and we're just going to wake those up a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit of beef better than bouillon. I want there to be like a really rich beefy flavor to this, and I am adding lots of beef. You'll see I'm adding in another kind of beef in a moment, but I'm just going to add, I don't know, like a little less than a tablespoon of better than bouillon in there, and I'm going to mix this through. And this is just going to add another layer of flavor to this because our tomato products are going to be added next. And sometimes tomato products, you know, they kind of, in a way, water down the flavor of the meat. So we are going to add a beer, which I know sounds insane, but we're going to add, we have a 16-ounce beer here. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but this is what made my friend Kathy's chili so good. Was a beer. Now you can add a lime flavored beer. Like I have used Bud Light Lime on this before. If I didn't have, you know, like a regular beer in the house. But the lime flavored beer for some reason is actually really good too. I didn't have that. I just had a regular beer. So that's what we're going to put in. And this regular beer just adds so much flavor, and it's really good. So now that beer is going to go in, and we're going to reduce this by half. You don't want to leave that beer in there as is and start to add the rest of your ingredients. You want to kind of bring this to a boil, and you want to simmer this down and reduce the flavor and reduce the amount of liquid that you have in there. We are going to be adding some tomatoes, probably about 50 ounces of tomatoes. And so we don't want this to be super liquidy and then have to reduce down even more because we didn't reduce the beer now. So this beer is going to simmer with our meat, and when that reduces by about half, I will show you what the next step is. So our beer is now bubbling, and this is exactly what you want. You want to leave this like this, I would say, for about 10 minutes, and you want your beer to reduce by half along with your seasonings, your onion, your peppers, and your ground beef. Our meat mixture with the beer in it has reduced down. It took about 8 to 10 minutes for that to happen. And so now you can see like it's really bubbling, but we've got a lot less liquid in there now. If you don't want to use alcohol in your cooking, if putting a beer in something is not what you prefer to do, that is okay. I would just suggest using 16 ounces of a really good beef stock. If you don't have beef stock on hand, you could use a chicken stock, or you could just even add water. But the beer in this chili is really great, and it gives it just such great depth of flavor, and so I do suggest using the beer. We used a light beer. We used a Mich Ultra. You could also try a dark beer. I'm sure that would be delicious as well. Generally, I do not use a dark beer when I make the chili, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with trying that. I think it would be fantastic. So at this point, I'm now going to add my tomato paste. Now, the recipe calls for a couple spoonfuls of tomato paste, but personally, I don't like opening a jar of tomato paste, using a little, and then putting the rest in the fridge. So I am just using an entire 6-ounce can of tomato paste for this, and it will add really nice tomatoey flavor, and it's going to help to thicken the chili as well. So we've got that, and I'm just kind of mixing that into my meat, beer, and vegetable mixture here. And just scraping all of that tomato paste off this spatula. Okay, and so that is combined, and now we're going to add a 10-ounce can of diced tomatoes with green chilies. These chilies are not the really spicy kind. They're kind of like the green chilies that you find in the little can by the taco stuff. And then I've got another 40 ounces of tomato product here. So these are home canned tomatoes, and those are going to go in. So that's a total of 50 ounces of canned tomato. Now you could use any kind of tomato that you like for your chili. I was using what I had on hand and what I wanted to use up out of my pantry. The tomatoes in the jars that I'm using are home canned, and I've shown you guys how to do that. I showed that in a video before. But you could just use cans of tomatoes. You could use fire roasted tomatoes. You could use stewed tomatoes. You could use the ones with the chilies, or even like the Italian seasoning if you want. Anything you like in your chili is completely fine. So now that we've added our tomato products, we're going to let this simmer, and we're going to bring this to a simmer and let this cook all day. Now, I know some people probably do add beans to their chili and some people do not. We do add beans to our chili. So I have here a can of dark red kidney beans, light red kidney beans, and black beans. Those are going in here as well. And those cans of beans I opened them up and I rinsed them and then just let them drain. And so those are going in. Now the other day we made a whole filet for dinner. It was around the holidays and we had a little bit of meat left over. And so I'm going to add, and I'm not sure if I'm going to add all of this, but I have a pound of filet that we didn't finish when we had our holiday meal. And I didn't want to waste this meat. So I'm going to start by adding about half of it. That's about a half a pound of chopped up filet. If we don't use all of it, that's okay. I do want this chili to be very meaty and hearty, but I also don't want it to have too much meat in it. So for right now, we're just going to add half a pound of that chopped up leftover filet. And chili is a really great way to use up stuff from your fridge. If you have like a half empty jar of salsa in your fridge, dump that in. If you got a little extra tomato sauce in the fridge, you can dump that in. Chili is really one of those things where like you can use it to clean out your fridge a little bit of tomato products or things like salsa or tomato sauce or, like I said, leftover meat. And so we'll taste this as it simmers. It's going to simmer all day. If we want to add a little bit more of that meat, we will. If not, I could always throw it into a freezer bag, put it in the freezer for the next time I make like a beef barley soup or chili or something else. But this is a very good way to use up some leftovers if you have them. So now we're going to let this simmer just for hours and hours, and then I'll taste it in a couple of hours and see how we are with seasoning. But this could not be easier. It took me probably less than a half hour to get my bread dough going and my chili going, and now tonight we'll have a nice warm hearty dinner. So I will check in with you shortly. Our chili's been cooking all day, and as you can see, it's kind of reduced down. Now I've tasted this for seasoning. I added a little bit more of the Ancho chili powder. I added a little bit more cumin and a little bit more of the paprikas, but this is tasting great, smells amazing. And I am glad I only added about a half a pound of that filet that I had chopped up because it's definitely meaty enough. And I just took the rest of that meat and put it in a freezer bag in the freezer for the next time that we make a soup that has beef in it. So this is ready to go, and now we're going to get our bread going. Our chili has simmered most of the day, and now we're ready to get our bread in the ovens. So this bread dough has been sitting on the counter in a nice warm space all day, probably about 8.5 hours or so. And like I said, this dough would normally rest for about 12 hours. Like normally I would make it overnight. So I would make it at bedtime, and then the next morning I would shape it and then bake it. But I forgot yesterday, and so we are just doing the best we can today. And so I'm just going to get a little bit of bench flour here. And all I really need to do, very much like when you make sourdough bread, is do some stretch and folds and then get this back in the bowl on some parchment to rise for another 30 minutes. So both of my bread doughs are going to do that. And so We will be preheating the oven to 450 when this dough is almost ready to go in the oven, but we've got at least another half hour of rising time to go before that is going to be ready. So what we're really just doing is working this dough into a ball. We want to just build up some texture on it. Now, I don't like to add a lot of flour when I do this, and this recipe came from Becky at Acre Homestead. I will link this recipe in the description for you. This is not my recipe, but I have made it multiple times and I absolutely love this recipe and it always comes out great. And Becky has it on her website, and like I said, I will share that link with you. So I am just trying to get this shaped, and I don't want to add a tremendous amount of flour when I do this. So I am just using my scraper here to sort of grab the edges of the bread and push them into the center and just kind of repeat that. And then I'm going to flour up my hands, because once you have this sort of shaped and sort of tightly folded to the center like this, which you want to do a couple of times until you feel like the bread is changing in texture. And if your hands stick to it just a tiny bit, that's okay. Like I said, I just don't want to add a tremendous amount of flour to this because I don't want it to be rough. But what you want to do then is kind of gather it into a ball and give it kind of a swirl on your countertop so that you can sort of get like a tight ball shape. And then that is what's going to sit in your bowl for another half hour and then is going to rise for you. So I am going to get a piece of parchment just right here into my bowl, and then I am going to just grab a little bit more flour here. It's like I said, I don't want to add a tremendous amount of flour, but I don't want this to be sticking. And so I'm just going to do a couple more folds to build up some tension in the dough, and then kind of flip it over and give it like a twist so that it firms up and kind of gathers together in more of a firm ball. And so you can see the difference between this and a moment ago. This is more of a firm ball, and then we're just going to plop this back into this bowl. And then this is going to rise on the counter for about another half hour. I'm going to cover it, keep it warm over by the stove, and I'll show you how to do that with the next loaf as well. All right, so a little bit more flour here. We're going to get our second ball of dough out. Now, when you cook these loaves, you cook them very much like you do a sourdough loaf. So what you're going to do is put this in a 450 degree oven. Your Dutch oven is going to go into the oven while the oven preheats with the lid on. And so your Dutch oven will get screaming hot. Your oven's at 450, and you're going to put your dough with the parchment paper and everything right into your Dutch oven, and then cover it, and then that'll bake at 450 for about 30 minutes, and then you're gonna uncover it and let it bake for another 10 minutes. And every time you do this, I'm just saying it'll come out perfect. Like, I don't know what the magic is with this recipe, but it comes out perfect every time. And that sort of covered high heat cook time is gonna let the dough rise. And then that additional 10 minutes is just going to make sure that the center of the dough is cooked fully for you. So I'm just going to get a little more flour. Just make sure the underside here isn't sticking. I'm just going to do some more of these like stretch and fold motions. And as you can see, the dough really kind of firms up, the texture changes when you do this. And I'm just going to get some of this excess flour and dough off my hands here so that it's easier to work with. But again, if you feel a little bit of stick, add a little bit of flour. Make sure your hands have some flour on them and your dough has some flour under it. And then just kind of give it some more folds. And then flip it over, give it a couple of twists and turns to sort of firm up the dough. And then again, we're putting our parchment in the bowl, and then we're going to grab this dough off the counter and get it right in our bowl. And then this is going to get covered up, and these will proof on the counter for at least a half hour. And we will score them right before we put them in the pan to bake them, and I will show you what that looks like when we're ready. Our bread is rising for the second time, and our chili is done, so I just wanted to show you how this came out now. I'm just having a little bit right now. I'm waiting for our bread to be made so that I can have my dinner, but we need to let this bread rise a little bit longer before I put it in the oven. So just going to taste the chili now, make sure that it's fabulous, and then if I need to change any of the seasonings, I can do that. So I added a little shredded cheddar cheese and some sour cream on the top, and I'm going to give it a sample. That came out so good. The meat is really savory. I like the texture that the beans add. The sour cream is great because it cools off a little bit of the heat from the chilies. And who doesn't love cheese? And I think overall it came out really, really good. So this is going to be a great dinner tonight, and then leftovers are going to make great lunches for during the week. Then I will show you our bread when it's all done. So our oven is preheated, and this is our Dutch oven that is very, very hot and just came out of the oven. Our bread dough has risen beautifully, so it looks great, and that second rise was wonderful. And I'm just going to take this bread. It's like a bread lame. That's what it's called, but it's like a razor, and it's very, very sharp. And this is just what you use to score your bread. So I am just going to kind of make like a quick sort of circle sort of cut on the surface of the bread. And then real quick, get this in the Dutch oven. And then I am going to get my lid on. And this goes in my oven, 450 degrees for 30 minutes with the lid on, and then we take the lid off for 10 minutes, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out. Our first loaf of bread is out of the oven, and it's cooling, and so we're gonna get our second loaf in, and this pot is very hot, so I just wanna remember that and not touch it. And again, I'm just gonna score my bread. And then just lift this up and get it in the pot. And then put the lid on. And I'm going to get this back in the oven, 30 minutes covered, and then 10 minutes uncovered. And I'll show you our two loaves when they're both done. Both of our loaves of bread are out of the oven, and it looks like they turned out okay. So I was worried when I first did this morning that 8 hours of proofing would not be enough time, but it looks like we did okay. Our loaves came out sounding and looking good, and so I'm going to let them finish cooling. This one is warm, this one is hot, just fresh out of the oven. I'm going to let them cool. We're going to slice them and enjoy them with some butter and jam. We do have our finished pot of chili here, and it was delicious. We had such a good dinner. I want to thank you for joining us in the Pickup Kitchen. As always, I'm so appreciative of you all being here and watching my videos, and I just appreciate it so much. I love to share recipes with you, and I love that you're here and enjoying them with me. If you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Good night. That came out great. So I could not be done for the night without trying some bread. So I'm adding butter. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of jam. This is homemade strawberry jam, so I'll try to get my butter off the knife. I'll put a little jam with the butter. All right, I'm ready. Oh yeah, that came out great. Thanks again for watching.